All right, thanks, Vic. Much appreciated. Doug, are you still here and want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, Doug Tuman, I run the Monero Talk show YouTube channel, a Monerotopia YouTube channel with Sunita Chakraborty, and we love Monero, and I love that you got this going, man. We're trying to stream this live on the Monero Talk YouTube channel as well. So anybody that wasn't able to catch it, they should be able to catch it on YouTube. It should record it there as well.
Perfect. I think I just finally solved my issue with the audio playing back on the other device. I just set up a Bluetooth headset to it and just had it output to the Bluetooth headset that I'm no longer wearing. So hopefully that'll work out fine with everything. But a bit of a workaround. Who else wants to jump in and say hi? I see we have Don here. I see we have Seth. We have some wonderful names here that are incredibly knowledgeable about Monero. And again, we had one question that came in from Sad Options Trader, again using the hashtag Monero space. So it says, what do you guys think about the future of privacy coins as technology continues to further advance? I think we're all pretty pessimistic about them, right? I think we all just think privacy coins should die. Is that the unanimous opinion of the panel, I think? I think, like, Vic and Doug, like, that's pretty obvious, right? We think they're about to die.
Aren't they dead already?
That's a good point, yeah.
Well, that's what somebody commented on my $1,000 Monero tweet, that that's just a dead coin. So maybe it's already dead, according to some people.
Yeah, I think here you're going to have people that are quite optimistic about the future of privacy. Seth is saying that he requested an invite to be added. I don't see him yet, so I don't know. I'm going to have to scroll through the list and find him. I know that he's been on here, but there's like 100 some odd people here, so it's a bit of a weird. I can search. Okay, makes sense. So I'll be adding Seth here in a second. Actually, I don't see him. Weird. It says on my end he's not even on. Weird. But I see it on the other end. Twitter Spaces. It's working itself out eventually. But I think the main reason we have to celebrate today is, of course, the Monero atomic swaps. I mean, what a great thing to wake up to this morning. Like, out of all things, like, what a perfect day. I wake up and we have just Comet Network that's like, oh yeah, by the way, this awesome thing has already been happened. Has happened. So sorry, I'm trying to add other guests while we're doing
Justin,
this.
I think the last time, or the first time you did one of these was when Monero broke its all-time high, right? You seem to have a pretty good knack at doing these at the right time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should just schedule these when I want there to be a fun event, and then it will eventually happen, right? Let's see, Seth. All right, so I can invite this. All right, so I invited Seth through some like weird roundabout way. And I'm going to invite Don just in case, just because I imagine he probably has asked for an invite, but like I can't see it. I'm going to, there we go. So I invited those two people. So Seth, I tried to reinvite you again. But yeah, it's, I'm super, super excited about, I guess, the scheduling of these. We should schedule these more often if we have a bunch of good events, I guess. But yeah, Monero atomic swaps are phenomenal. Oh, hey, Seth. Looks like you made it as a speaker finally.
I think so. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Perfect. Want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, sure. My name is Seth Simmons. Active in the Monero community. Been around for a few years now. Just trying to do education, a website that I run, blog posts that I write. And just kicked off a podcast that'll be going live next week as well. So just trying to do my part to educate about Monero and just privacy in general as well. Trying to help people learn how to just refocus and take back their privacy. So excited to chat with more people on this and hopefully answer a lot of questions and have some good discussions.
Perfect. Yeah, Seth is one of our most prolific contributors in the Monero community. He's able to answer quite a few questions. He came up with the Bitcoin fungibility graveyard on his website. So if you want to have a nice link to show when you're trying to argue with someone, be like, you know, Bitcoin's fungibility problems are actually pretty significant. Hello, we've been saying this for years. it's a good place to point people to. And he also made a really good full node guide if you were running your own full node, which I think out of most community members or most communities, Monero probably has a pretty well represented group of people that run their own full nodes. So that's obviously really awesome to see.
Okay. All right.
Don, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Justin. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm Don Yaka. I'm a strong believer in Monero. Yeah, and right now we're experiencing a historical event. This is the first ever Twitter space that Monero has done. And I think right now there's like around 188 people online. So this is awesome.
Yeah, Don, want to give a background on what you do?
What do I do? I'm involved in many projects. And yeah, Monero just is the most interesting to me and makes more sense to me out of most coins. It aligns with my beliefs, and yeah, I love it. It's the best.
Yeah, that's, I mean, a lot of us here really like Monero, that's why we're on. But I just want to stress, one of the main reasons I like Monero is that it really delivers privacy. Like, it just doesn't promise privacy that eventually will come, probably, maybe, if you do it right. Like, it just starts with a simple idea of, let's make privacy really widespread and hard to screw up. Oh, a lot of people are sending these transactions in a really bad way. Let's make it so that people aren't able to do that. Let's make it so all the wallets, all the exchanges, all the mining pools, they all protect privacy. And so every transaction hides the sender, receiver, and amount. It's not about crazy wizardry math, although Monero does have some pretty dope math too. But it just takes the simple idea that let's make privacy for everybody and runs with it. So I think in the last year, especially, like, Monero has really, really been understood in the broad cryptocurrency community as the privacy tool for most people, the financial privacy tool that you should use. So among everyone here, do you have any comments about how Monero has done that? Do you think that that's a really good idea? And we have some other questions coming in too that I can get to once we address just the importance of how Monero gets privacy out to everybody, not just like 3 people.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, that's the big focus for Monero is making privacy approachable. It's not just about this pipe dream of, hey, these people are extremely tech savvy and have all this extra money and time to learn these tools can get privacy. It's how do we make privacy something that anyone who picks up any Monero wallet can achieve? And I think that's not only an admirable goal, I think that's what any project that's claiming to be privacy centric should be focused on. Not just building tools for the kind of the techno savvy and the wealthy, but building tools that anyone can easily pick up, learn, and start using to protect their privacy. So obviously Monero excels at that. Been proven by the growth in the community, the growth in on-chain usage, the growth in price over the years, and the growth in adoption by merchants. Yeah, I don't have any concrete numbers. It's just a phenomenon I've been witnessing as I've been diving more into specifically projects in the free and open source software space that are focused on being privacy preserving, or just focused on being useful tools to help you kind of regain data sovereignty. And as I've been digging through that, more and more projects are starting to either accept Monero for donations as the main way you can donate to their project, or even only accepting Monero for donations. I think I've made a list on my blog, SethSimmons.me, that has a lot of different ones that I found interesting or that people have suggested. But it seems like a big wave is pushing through the part of the FOSS community that is aware of the need for privacy. And that wave includes Monero as the tool to transact privately. So it's how they want to be donated to. It's how more and more merchants want to accept payment, so they don't have to worry about privacy gotchas or censorship or middlemen. It really opens up a lot of things there. So definitely keep an eye on the projects you like. See if they accept Monero for donations, and if they do, throw some Monero their way to just show how important it is and to support them. It's a great tool for that.
Nice. We had a question come in. I want Don to actually address this one. It says, just because I think he's going to give a very, very a colorful response. So it says, as Monero becomes more popular, how will the community react with increased government scrutiny? Will the community continue to resist government intrusion or compromise for wider adoption? But they say this, like what the Bitcoin Common is doing. And it's AMC to the moon. So Don, what do you think?
So, did you say government? What are the governments? What was the question?
Yeah, so when it says, how will the community in Monero react with increased government scrutiny? Will we resist certain intrusions, or will we be like, well, let's remove some privacy features perhaps to make people more comfortable?
Yeah, so my response would be, what makes Monero is its privacy, right? It actually achieves what it claims. And even if Monero was to get delisted from all the centralized exchanges right now, that doesn't mean anything, you know. There's decentralized exchanges. I think there's Waves that Monero is listed there. Haveno is getting built as we speak. Atomic swaps, right? You know, it's like the best example I could give you guys is, for example, Uniswap token, right? If it's on a decentralized exchange. If that was to get delisted from centralized exchanges, it really wouldn't matter, right? And the cool thing about decentralized exchanges are most of the time there's no market makers there. Like, it's pure volume, you know. So I don't think you know, governments, or it can't be shut down. There'll always be Monero. Yeah, just people just need to understand it, because at the end of the day, as Daniel Kim says, people are buying Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies thinking it has Monero's features, right? It's till when people day to day start using cryptocurrencies, they realize that, you know, I can have a peek at this person's address when sending a transaction and vice versa. So I think in time and slowly we are seeing in DeFi, people are actually starting to build on top of Monero. You know, like, privacy is starting to, people are starting to take it seriously, you know, and I think everyone's still early. This is still the early stages, and this is just going to get bigger and better, because at the end of the day, this is what cryptocurrency is about, the whole cypherpunk movement. And yeah, you know, anonymous digital magic money, you know, that's what it's about. And Monero ticks all the boxes, and yeah, no one can stop it.
I think that's a good point, that it just can't happen. Sorry, go ahead, Vic.
No, I was just saying, I think that's the atomic swaps is a great example of how the community responds, as all these centralized exchanges are getting pressured to drop Monero. The Monero community is turning around and saying, okay, fine, we'll just build decentralized exchanges. So, you know, it shows the resiliency of the coin and of the community. So even if tomorrow there's a total ban, I don't know how they'd ban a decentralized exchange.
Yeah,
unless it's outright illegal to use, you know, a little program, which I don't believe so.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of that too is the tools that are being built out, they're not, I mean, you could try to ban it, but enforcing something like that is next to impossible. I mean, Atomic Swaps is obviously a prime one that just went live for the first time on mainnet today, and all that requires is you to have some communication channel between you and another party who wants to swap Bitcoin or Monero, and everything else happens on chain and cannot be censored, cannot be stopped. So there's a lot of power there in removing the need for regulatory approval and for governmental approval. We'll build the tools that make that unnecessary. If regulators and governments want to stay on board and allow Monero to thrive, great. But if not, oh well, we're going to build the tools that make it impossible to stop. And atomic swaps are a big step forward. Other decentralized exchanges like Haveno, which will allow people to go from fiat currency like dollars, euros, that kind of thing, straight into Monero. That's going to be a huge step forward. And again, that's directly peer-to-peer. You're swapping with someone else on the other end over Tor. It's going to be incredibly difficult to stop, even if there was some sort of ban. And then, in addition to Haveno, you have multi-chain dexes like Thorchain, which is building out a DEX integration for Monero. So Monero will be able to be swapped in there, and that's it's not directly peer-to-peer. It's similar to Uniswap, that kind of AMM model that you'll be swapping to a pool of liquidity, but that'll be another decentralized way to be able to trade Monero, get in and out of Monero. And then you also have some more trusted exchange types like the Secret Network, which just launched a Monero testnet as well. So you see, really any project that sees the need for privacy, they're integrating Monero and they're building on top of Monero because it's the clear industry-leading, world-leading privacy preserving token. And any project that really understands the need for privacy is focused on making sure that Monero is a prime integration.
Yeah, I want to keep on this topic, but let me first introduce the two other speakers that came up. So we have Jill and we have Giannik. Jill, would you like to say hi first, introduce yourself, let the Monero community here on Twitter know who you are?
Hi, Monero fam. I'm Jill from the Open Economy Initiative. I've been contributing in the crypto space for the past 4 years, and I'm a huge privacy advocate. And I agree with Seth and Don. I think this is the perfect storm because we are watching Bitcoin being destroyed by regulatory means, right? I mean, there's so many things that a Bitcoin user now has to consider. You know, where was my Bitcoin mined? Who used it before me? I mean, it's just giving me anxiety just to go through of all the things that I have to think about. Whereas Monero is being implemented, and we are having the Haveno, the decentralized exchange, now Commit, and I feel like today we finally reached this unstoppable stage where, you know, from here on, they can't do anything to stop this technology, and that's just so excited. And I'm seeing all these people, Monero fam, on this call. Oh my God, I'm so glad you made this happen, Justin. Thank you so much.
I could hear the excitement in your voice. I think we're all pretty excited today, so that's good news. What other cryptocurrency communities are this excited when the main market's down, right? Like this is a true Monero experience. No one even notices. We're just like, oh, atomic swaps, awesome. Sorry, Giannik. Can you introduce yourself? You're a longtime Monero contributor too. I want to say what you do.
Seeing if you're alive.
For sure. Thanks, Justin. I'm Giannik. I'm one of the contributors to Monero Outreach, and I do some other stuff around the community. I've been involved since 2016. Monero Outreach, for those of you who don't know, produces materials for mostly for new Monero fans and members of the community. So if you want to learn more, you can go to monerooutreach.org, and we also do the Monero TV short videos, if you've seen those around. And I also helped produce Monero Means Money together with Justin. So that's me.
Those Monero TVs are absolutely fantastic. They're short clips. Have you thought about using the new, I don't remember the name is, the YouTube TikTok alternative, the clips, YouTube clips or whatever it's called?
Shorts.
Shorts.
YouTube.
Thank you, Shield. Yeah, the YouTube Shorts. Have you thought about making those just under 1 minute as a YouTube Short as well?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a perfect fit for those videos because they're just about that length. Is there an audience for those videos though? Do they go to a specific sort of channel for people to follow, or how does that work?
Actually, you should do it ASAP because right now you're like a first mover, and what YouTube does is just rotates the shorts because there's so few of them. So Monero could get a lot more visibility by that method.
I'll look into that. Cool.
yeah, just hack whatever you can put together in a day, put it up, and watch the numbers come in. Is my take, but I don't know. I'm excited. I don't know TikTok very well though. I'm not on TikTok, so that's the problem. Someone who's an expert in TikTok will have to let us know what all the cool kids are doing now.
Yeah, TikTok's crazy, man. I've seen some crazy stuff there. People just screaming their lungs out, shilling coins. You might have to do a bit of screaming, Gianni.
Yeah, you never know.
Excellent.
Shout out to some of the long-term community members here who are listening also. We have Untraceable and BTC Lovera and Mark, what's his face? Deverick, I think Deverick wanted to join as a speaker too, if you want to invite him.
Sure. Sorry, it's hard for me to notice. So please do speak up. If you can ping me in any way and be like, hey, I'm a longtime person, please let me in. It's hard for me to do while this is going on 2 phones. So I'll add anybody who's interested, but I need some reminders. So I'll add him in a second here. Thanks. But let's continue the conversation on the whole atomic swap side of thing. I mean, the discussion was sort of this helps make sure that Monero is not going away, right? Like everyone sort of says, well, I'm interested in Monero, but I'm also concerned that it'll be the target of regulatory scrutiny or the like, right? And I've argued that, at least in the US, these concerns are well overblown, and so have others, but the fear has still stayed, right? So what other ways do atomic swaps really help to make sure that, hey, users don't need to use, a centralized regulated exchange? They can just do peer-to-peer trades with anybody in the world, right? How much adoption do we think these will actually see? Do you think that most users who have Bitcoin are even going to bother mixing their Bitcoin anymore? Or are they just going to swap it for Monero? What are our hypotheses, thoughts there? And that's open to anyone in the room.
I think a lot would depend on whether it leaves a trace on the Bitcoin side that an atomic swap to Monero occurred. And I've heard conflicting opinions on that. So do you know if it leaves a trace or not on the Bitcoin side?
It does. Yeah, that is one of the downsides. I mean, is you're swapping through a chain that is transparent and doesn't do a good job of hiding details. So when you're swapping from Bitcoin to Monero or vice versa, it is visible that an atomic swap has happened. Apparently that will improve with Schnorr. So like initially the Comet network atomic swaps that are live today, those can't use Schnorr obviously because Schnorr 6 are not live on the Bitcoin network. But forecasters being built around Schnorr signatures, so that will help obfuscate that. It'll look like a regular single sig transaction at that point.
So no hope for Satoshi's coins moving to Monero then.
People will know that Satoshi moved his coins, and if he atomic swaps right now, they'll know he atomic swapped them for Monero, which would be quite interesting.
Yeah, so just to make sure we have coverage, someone asked the question, can anyone comment on the robustness of the ED 25519 EC versus SEP? Oh, never mind, this is a different question. This is probably more an MRL question, but someone asked, can anyone comment on the robustness of the ED 25519 elliptic curve versus SEP 256K1? Is there anyone here that's that's qualified to answer that, or should we just push them to the Monero Research Lab channel on Matrix? Sorry, I thought that was a Schnorr versus not Schnorr question, and then I started reading it, and clearly that was wrong. So I would advise that Mark for asking this question. I can try to take a stab, but my answer is going to be really bad. So I do recommend that you reach out to the Monero Research Lab channel, or you can ask, of course, or read Zero to Monero, see if it answers the question, and if not, then by all means check out with the MRL channel. Any other comments on atomic swaps? Anything else that people want to get their little soundbite in for? Now's your chance. Now's your chance to leave your little soundbite.
I would just say a really important point for people to remember is because atomic swaps are peer-to-peer, liquidity is going to be important. So if people are willing to swap Bitcoin for Monero or vice versa, getting in early as someone who's offering to take the trade one way or another is going to be helpful to onboard and offboard people both ways. And another key point of atomic swaps is, yes, the Bitcoin side is visible. That side's transparent. It's unfortunate. It's nothing the Monero community can do to hide what happens in the Bitcoin ledger. But that doesn't mean that it's able to be censored or stopped. So the important thing with atomic swaps is they are between two parties, and no matter what happens, both sides get the outcome they want. So if you want to go through with the trade, you go through with the trade. No one can stop that. You're going to get your coins. If something goes wrong or the other party is malicious, you're going to get your coins back. So that's really that's the value of atomic swaps, is it's an actually trustless way to swap directly with someone. There's no arbitration. There's no multi-sig that the coins are going into that someone else has key to. There's nothing like that. It's directly peer-to-peer, which is, it's an awesome step forward and something that's been talked about for a really long time in the cryptocurrency space, and pretty rarely actually implemented or used. So I think Monero is going to be a big driver to get this technology that's been talked about for a long time actually being used heavily across the board. I know there's a lot of interest from people in the Bitcoin space, especially people who already see the need for privacy to be able to swap their Bitcoin into Monero for specific needs. And I think once people get into Monero, once they start using it, they're going to get more and more hesitant to actually swap back into Bitcoin. And that's going to be a great driver for growth and usage and adoption.
I think adoption-wise, it's going to be easier for like projects like CoinJoin, Samurai Wallet, Wasabi. Like they already have ready user base of people who value their privacy, right? So I think we'll see them integrating atomic swaps as well. And I think actually Samurai Wallet are already working on that. So that's some cool stuff. You know, I'm not sure how much user base they have or anything like that, but it's just an easier solution for them, you know, because from what I know, what they're doing it doesn't work. So I think that will be like the first phase of adoption with atomic swaps. And then the second phase of adoption, we'll see DEXs, decentralized exchanges, implementing it. So exciting stuff, guys.
Yeah, and we have Vic here. Maybe Vic can tell us, is Cake Wallet working on atomic swaps already, or?
The only pseudo-atomic swap system we're working with right now is Thorchain. And actually Justin's involved in that. He's communicating with us with the folks over at Thorchain. So yeah, we're on it. And I even commented on Reddit this morning that Commit, we haven't studied that at all. But that's something we're definitely going to start looking into. But it is our goal to have atomic swaps or any kind of decentralized exchange in Cake Wallet. But just as a question, I mean, if you're a Monero holder and you know through this atomic swap you're getting some tainted or dirty Bitcoin, my question is always, who's doing it and why are they doing it? Why would you get rid of Monero unless you're, I don't know, maybe getting some massive premium over the price to get that dirty Bitcoin? But then you're stuck with dirty Bitcoin, and that's as Seth said, that's written for the rest of history. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Why would you do it? Why would you exchange your Monero for dirty Bitcoin?
I will just say, I mean, there's definitely a risk that you could get tainted Bitcoin. I think it depends on the use case that you have for that. It could be you need to pay something in Bitcoin. They don't accept Monero yet, so you want to swap Monero for Bitcoin and paying that. Most people actually paying in Bitcoin aren't affected by the fungibility issues yet, so that wouldn't normally be a problem even if you have tainted Bitcoin. But I mean, it's definitely a concern. This is the problem when you try to join fungible money and non-fungible money. You have a lot of difficulties, and I think the Monero liquidity side will be tricky from the beginning, because people in Monero obviously value the fungibility and privacy that comes in Monero by default. And there's definitely a smaller part of Bitcoin that values that. So it'll be interesting to see how that actually works out. But I'm sure there are reasons people want to do it. It'll be interesting to see. The issues that are inherent in Bitcoin will definitely be problematic, but there are also some tools that people can take. If you get tainted Bitcoin, you could use Whirlpool and other tools to mix them again and try to make them usable. How long that will work out, I don't know, but there's definitely some uses for it.
Someone posted a meme a few days ago, maybe weeks now, to the Monero subreddit, Monero, and one of it's like it's the whole meme where I had the guy's name in my head as I was starting this conversation. The not Minions movie. Who's the main character is showing a whiteboard and he's like, "This is our evil plan," right? And he starts with like, "You have tainted Bitcoin, right? And you swap it for Monero, right? And then the next step is you swap it back for Bitcoin, and then you get tainted Bitcoin back, right?" So then the final panel is him just like being like, "Actually, just keep the Monero," right? So I think in some people's heads that'll be the process where they try to just figure out ways to use Monero for the everyday pattern rather than try to swap back for tainted Bitcoin. But obviously, there's some people that are going to be experts at knowing how to try to break Bitcoin traceability and taint and the like. But of course, for a cake wallet user, for example, right, it's meant to be easy, right? They're not meant to be like experts in this stuff. They're meant to just have Monero and make it work. So we'll see what the target audience looks like for those sorts of things. But Deverick, you've been on as a speaker for a while. I know that Giannick said you wanted to participate, so welcome, Deverick. You want to introduce yourself to the wide Monero Twitter community here?
Yeah, sure. I've been in the Monero community for a while. Deverick Apollo here. Do a lot of volunteer work with Monero. I was working on the Monero Co conference in Berlin. I've done the Monero conference that we had in Denver, Leipzig. So I'm always jumping around, always boots on the ground, always ready to get some work done. Love Monero, love privacy, love our community. We got a big push going on. Happy to celebrate atomic swaps with everyone. Totally excited for the work that they've been doing over there at Comet. So shout out to the family here, just ready to talk about privacy.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for being here. For everyone who wants to know how Monero has all these really dope parties, Deverick's a big reason. same with Jill, but
I guess we didn't mention that, but yeah, I am also the Monero party boss. So for any of those that are planning to come to DEF CON or attend the Monero Village at DEF CON this August in Las Vegas, do look out for an upcoming Monero party that we have, an after party. So just pay attention to Twitter for that.
Awesome.
Hey,
sorry, go ahead, Doug.
Just question on the topic of swaps. So just trying to understand this deeper. So how does this compare? Obviously, it's understood that it's decentralized and whatnot. But how does this compare to other methods that are currently used by Bitcoiners to essentially mix their coins? In terms of how chain analytics companies are going to view it. So anybody that it sounds like anybody that's has Bitcoin that's going to atomically swap it for Monero, that Bitcoin will be essentially tainted as having been part of an atomic swap, correct?
Yeah, the way I see it, like atomic swaps are going to be a tool that is most useful to people who have tainted Bitcoin and don't want to go through the hassle of mixing it themselves or otherwise going through a convoluted process. They're going to pay a premium. For the Monero, they're going to sell that tainted Bitcoin, and then they're going to end up with Monero that they use for whatever they want to use it for. That's at least the most obvious use case I see.
But it will be seen and known that it was essentially swapped for like it would be known by chain analytics companies will see that it went through an atomic swap, correct?
Yep, they would see that you swapped at it in the current state. As Seth was saying, once Bitcoin does move to Schnorr, which is expected, but not for certain, then it will make it far more difficult for them to actually tell that a swap occurred. But really on the Monero side, there's nothing we can do about that besides hope that it happens.
So do we think, so will chain analytics company view those things differently, like atomic swapping versus, other means that are currently used in terms of how they mark that Bitcoin and assess its risk?
Probably not, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're probably only selling Bitcoin that are already tainted, right? So sure, they can mark it as similar risk to mixing, but like if you're trying to get out of like sanctioned funds, right, or something like you. What's this extra tag going to do to you? It's really going to get in your way. You're already having funds that are probably not well transferable. So, but let's say they might not be making their way in the Bitcoin OFAC compliant blocks. Let's say.
Right. Exactly. Got it.
But maybe there's someone in the audience who doesn't know what we mean by tainted Bitcoin. So, Doug, do you want to just give a brief explanation of what tainted Bitcoin is?
Yeah, well, it's just this idea that, Bitcoin is on is fundamentally transparent. The ledger is transparent. And because of that, annotations essentially can be marked next to any transaction. So you could essentially taint Bitcoin transactions and mark them, and you can blacklist wallets because of the transparent nature of Bitcoin. Whereas with Monero, it's resistant to taint. You can't taint a Bitcoin transaction because there's no means to track it or see it even happening.
Has any of you guys tried
thing...
the atomic swap? Because I just learned about it, so I'm so excited, but I haven't actually tried it yet.
They've had it on testnet for a while, so I'd recommend anyone who wants to just try it out, do it on testnet first to get familiar with the process. But obviously it is on mainnet, so people can test it out today. I have not gotten around to actually trying it out myself, so I'll probably try to do that over the next couple of weeks, hopefully. Just haven't had time yet.
Do you guys foresee more of a Bitcoin to Monero swaps?
I think the market's gonna end up deciding, so we'll see. Some Monero holders might want to take profit, when it goes to X amount. So you could people can go from XMR to BTC, but then we got to by talking about the tainted Bitcoins, it sounds like there's a bit of a hot potato situation that could occur. But as Seth was saying earlier, I think there are some precautions you could take to make it untainted somehow, or make it sellable or usable. Maybe you can even OTC it to someone, so there'd always be a way somehow, but it depends. Maybe all the Monero holders will just hold their Monero, and that will just make everything Monero more scarce, cutting out the circulation. So I think the market will decide, but it's great that the tool's going to be there, and we'll see what happens. And yeah, exciting stuff.
It's probably worth noting that taint, as defined today, is centered on a Western sort of definition, which is given by OFAC and these chain analysis companies and so on. While there's parts of the world like Russia and Iran that probably don't care if your, Bitcoin doesn't have the right history. So maybe that's the market.
I think too, BISC has been operating for a long time in this sphere of peer-to-peer swaps. Obviously they have an arbitrator, and there's been some differences there. Atomic swaps are more trustless, but it's a similar principle, and we've seen massive liquidity on BISC for Bitcoin to Monero swaps. And obviously there's someone selling Monero every time someone's buying Monero. So there has been liquidity both ways in the past, and people have been able to use the Bitcoin they've gained off of BISC in the past as well. So while fungibility is an issue with Bitcoin, not every exchange is taking severe precautions to prevent like users using tainted Bitcoin or something like that. So it's not like if you get tainted Bitcoin, it's completely unusable. It's just you're not going to have a great time generally. But I think this has been a good example of when a similar scenario happens, people are still willing to trade back and forth despite that.
Yeah, and also not every merchant has a $5,000 Chainalysis subscription or however much it costs. So you could still pass the hot potato to someone else for now.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is then the merchant has to deal with having Bitcoin that he may or may not be able to exchange to his local currency, which is more than likely what he wants to do. And that's obviously why Monero has such a focus on privacy and why that privacy enabling fungibility by default is such an important thing. And it's not just like some title, it's something that affects real people. I mean, that's why I put together the Fungibility Graveyard blog post, so people can see the real people who have their lives impacted by the traceability and the non-fungibility of Bitcoin. It's a serious problem. So it's definitely something that I'm glad that Monero has resolved to prevent and has prevented so far, done such a good job at. And it's something that will be interesting in atomic swaps, but I'm hopeful that it won't be too much of a problem and we'll still have good liquidity both ways, if nothing less, to onboard people into Monero so they see how incredible it is to use, how nice it is to be able to use a cryptocurrency without constantly worrying about what you're doing and how you're being traced and how you're connecting accounts and all of that stuff. It's a much more painless and much less fear-filled way to use cryptocurrency. Whenever I use Monero, it's a much different experience than when I'm using Ethereum or Bitcoin. I can rely on it.
Just to reset the room really quick, we're going through just everything Monero. Of course, we're celebrating today because of the atomic swaps being on mainnet, so everyone's excited. But we're happy to answer any questions that come in on Monero. Obviously, there's limited speaker slots, so instead of inviting people on stage, what we're doing is we're asking for you to tweet with the hashtag Monero Space. That way we can just get them on. One person asked on a similar topic to tainted Bitcoin and traceability. Someone jokingly asked, this is someone whose first name is Wrecked, says, when Monero RandomX Mining Council? So sadly, we don't have HYC on here, but who wants to give a quick overview of RandomX and talk about why, because of RandomX and of course because of fungibility, it's less likely that you're going to have some council that are trying to censor certain coins in practice, at least.
I guess I can take a stab at that. I'm one of RandomX's biggest fans, I think. So RandomX strives to go back to Satoshi's original idea, which was one CPU, one vote. And as we know, almost all proof of work blockchains, or pretty much all of them, have fallen to ASICs since 2013, I think, or 2014 was when the first Bitcoin ASIC was invented. And ever since then, Bitcoin has been dominated by ASICs. So if you want to mine Bitcoin today, you have to source this one-purpose machine, most likely from China, because that's where they're produced. And they're certainly overpriced by at least what I think is a fair price for them. I think one goes for $9,000 or so. So Monero, on the other hand, is mined by CPUs, and RandomX achieves that by some clever programming. So each time a new block is discovered, you actually run a completely new algorithm. So it's not as easily programmed as Bitcoin. And yeah, HYC was one of the architects of that, and it actually came from an anonymous Redditor, the idea for it originally. So it just goes to show anyone can come up with a great idea and revolutionize money.
Yeah, the other big piece for mining and mining censorship is the privacy that's inherent in Monero. The key problem that we're seeing with mining groups like Marathon Digital, Holdings, I think is the full name. They've implemented this mining pool that's somewhere between 7 and 15% of the global hash rate. And they're able to censor transactions because you can easily see what's happening with the Bitcoin transaction. You can use tools like CoinJoin, but you can clearly see that a tool like CoinJoin was used. So in the future, they could start just censoring CoinJoin transactions in general. So because of that transparency, those types of pools can work together to censor transactions. And if they get a large enough percentage of the network, they can force all other pools and miners to also censor transactions or get forked off the network. So that problem only exists because of the transparency of Bitcoin. So while RandomX helps to decentralize mining and helps prevent like mining cartels and groups coming together that would control an overwhelming portion of the network hash rate, even if they did come together at a like greater than 51% hash rate in Monero, they would have no way to be able to censor Monero transactions discriminately because they can't tell them apart. They can't tell what a person's doing with Monero using strictly on-chain data. So that's a really, really important part. The only thing they could do is if they had a large portion of the network, they could just mine empty blocks, which would be a form of censorship, but it's indiscriminate and it's not really preventable. It's just a type of attack against decentralized networks.
And,
Yeah,
and the other,
those.
sorry. The other thing I forgot that RandomX has enabled is just the number of miners has grown exponentially. I think we're over 100,000 individual miners on the network, which is, I think, a record.
And that's absolutely a lower bound. So that's the minimum that we know about. It's likely much, much higher than that. But that's the number that we know that are being reported by pools, but not even all pools report miner counts. So that 100,000 number is a record for us and it's continuing to grow, but that's also a lower bound. So there's likely far more people than that are mining Monero.
So yeah, guys, I had this guy, Mark Moss, on my show yesterday, interviewed him. He's a big Bitcoiner. He has like 250,000 YouTube subscribers. He's basically a maxi, but he says he doesn't consider himself a maxi. Really, really nice guy. We had a great conversation. But yeah, he's like, well, Doug, I guess we have to agree that, Bitcoin is a lot more secure than Monero. I mean, look at its hashing power. Look at all, the amount of mining that's going on in Bitcoin. Like, Monero is nowhere near that. And so that led to the discussion of, well, yeah, that it's great. Bitcoin is using up a ton of electricity and it's got all these miners running. But what does that really mean when transactions could effectively be censored for these reasons, Seth and Gianna are talking about, because of its lack of privacy and because of the fact that, mining essentially done by a few big guys that you could approach and you could ask them to censor a transaction. So just, I guess, more of a question for the community, maybe Justin, Seth, Gianna, whoever. How do we as the community begin to basically overcome this idea that Bitcoin is more decentralized or has a stronger network than Monero? What metric can we use, right? So Bitcoiners just point to the hashing power and say, well, look at all these miners that are mining Bitcoin. But yeah, like I said, the mining, the amount of mining doesn't really equate to how distributed the network is and how censorship resistant the network is. So is there some way to kind of show a metric that shows that Monero is arguably today more censorship resistant than Bitcoin?
I think the first thing to look at is the definition of censorship resistance, and where most Bitcoiners define it as, you can't stop me from pressing a button on my computer. I personally define it as, can you get a knock on the door? Because that's when real censorship happens, and that's the way censorship has worked throughout history in the real world. And just living in this ideal world where you don't think that you're susceptible to getting a knock on the door is just not realistic. So all of these Bitcoin miners, just the amount of electricity they burn, they're so easy to find, and any government can easily see just based on the grid and where large amounts of electricity are being used. Most likely they have a Bitcoin miner there, if they're not registered as a factory or something else. So to me, that's the first step, is redefining censorship resistance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. But how do we get that across to the people that aren't already like us, that understand this? I mean, because the Bitcoiners just point to the hashing power and say, look, that equals decentralization, that equals a strong network. But it doesn't really show the whole picture as you're describing, right? Because it is more about the knock on the door. So is there any evidence we can point to that shows that Monero is potentially more effectively censorship resistant today than Bitcoin?
So the two different metrics you're talking about, I think, are distinct, which is decentralization and censorship resistance. Decentralization is really hard to measure and really hard to objectively compare. So I think even comparing Monero and Bitcoin that way, it's hard to say which is more decentralized in that one word. It's kind of vague. I think obviously Monero wins in some categories, Bitcoin wins in some categories. A lot of the ways Bitcoin wins is just because it's so much larger. It has natural effects that help it in the decentralization categories, like node count, like number of distinct miners, that kind of thing. But the censorship resistant piece, so that one's clear. I mean, there's no number to show someone. It's just show them, hey, there are pools that censor transactions actively on the Bitcoin network. Why can they do this? They can do this because transactions are transparent. It's really simple. I mean, people can choose to deny it if they want, but that's just the facts. Obviously, that does not exist in Monero, and it cannot exist in Monero because no miner can actively say, I want to censor a transaction. It's just not possible because they can't tell those transactions apart unless they're getting some data from off-chain and they're doing something to be able to try to identify, like maybe a direct withdrawal from an exchange that they know the exchange wallet and are being given those details. Like a lot more has to go into anything similar. So there's no way just using on-chain data that miners can censor transactions. So the censorship one, I mean, that one's, it's black and white. There's active censorship on Bitcoin because of the transparency, and there is not and cannot be censorship on the Monero blockchain because of the privacy that's by default. But decentralization is really tricky. I mean, Monero normally far exceeds the node count numbers, developer count numbers, community member counts compared to its market cap of a lot of other coins. So I think that's a good indicator that it's very decentralized, but it's hard to actually put a calculation, a single number on this concept of decentralization.
Yeah, I want to second that. I think we can talk around in circles for literally ever about what is more decentralized or not, and everyone's going to have their own opinion. And at that point, it's more of an art than a science. I think really the best way to put it at the moment is that, at least from my perspective, I think that it's fair to say both Bitcoin and Monero are quite decentralized, certainly compared to most other projects. And if you just get this whole circular argument about which is more centralized or not, at that point, it just becomes more of a philosophical argument than a practical one. So I think it's worth having a discussion with people that are, let's say, from the Bitcoin community and think perhaps Bitcoin is the only thing that is decentralized. I mean, then you could be like, well, let's be serious here. Monero has a very broad community and it's quite decentralized, people. Give it the credit it deserves. But I don't know what type of argument you're going to have pass it that's going to convince too many people besides just reminding them hey, stop pretending that nothing else is decentralized. It's not just Bitcoin, people. That's my take, at least. Also, Andres, welcome, Andres.
Hi, how is everybody? Yeah,
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, yes. My name is Andres. I am a part of the Moneruyo team, the one of the other wallets that are available for Monero on Android. I just wanted to say regarding the censorship thing that we were discussing, that an angle that sometimes we express in the Spanish podcast that we do about Monero is that some people usually think about censorship like big government is looking after you, if you're like a political dissident or something very, very much like that. But something that is, I think, pervasive in our daily lives is like self-censorship. When you feel, especially with blockchains, and you start to know how they work and how permanent they are as a record of everything, you start to self-censorship yourself on stupid little things, or maybe little purchases, or nowadays a lot with donations to stuff. So you start to be less free of using your money. And when you're using Monero, and you start to be more like yourself. So it's like a complete angle that is not so political, so to speak, or not so high risk scenario, but it ends up being like a nice way of using your money, which we always say that is basically your work or your time saved in in something, in Monero in this case.
Well, welcome, Andres. It's great to have you on. I think we can go through some other comments that came in. We're actually having quite a few questions come in now with the hashtag Monero space included in people's tweets. So, and that's not the space bar, by the way. That's the full spelled out space. So we had one question that's pretty easy to answer. I'll just say with a single answer question. They asked if Monero will be switching to proof of stake, and the answer is no. Maybe in 50 years, I don't know if it is clearly proven to be quite good, but it's not likely at the moment. So the short answer is certainly no. And then someone's asked if they asked staff in particular if they could see someone setting up a decentralized tainted Bitcoin buying service. I don't know what you mean by decentralized tainted buying service, if it's one person that's buying it. And Seth isn't on the call anymore, but there is going to be someone. If you're buying Bitcoin with an atomic swap, you probably should know what your risks are. Another question on proof of stake from Jonathan Daniel. No, Monero is not switching to proof of stake for a variety of reasons. Monero uses RandomX, which of course we had Giannic really, really praising here, for example, and I also will praise and stand behind it. It seems to have worked really, really well. James asked, he's been around for on the Twitter space for quite a bit, and is very a prolific supporter of all the Monero tweets and stuff. He asked, what can us quote-unquote normies do to help further the progress of Monero and its community growth, etc.? Vic, do you want to start by answering this question, then we can pass it around to the other participants here?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. So the question was, what can us quote-unquote normies do to help further the progress of Monero and its community growth, etc.?
What can normies do? It's an interesting question. Just be involved in any way you can, from funding development to marketing, to talking about it, to acquiring Monero. And it depends on your skill level. If you're a coder, great thing about Monero, it's completely open source. It's not like some other coins, which I won't mention, that you have to go get permission. Like Cake Wallet, for example. We built Cake Wallet. We did not need any permission from anybody. We actually didn't even talk to anybody in the Monero core team or the community. So, if you want to get involved as a normie to build something on top of Monero or related to Monero, you can easily do it without permission. It's completely permissionless. So there's many ways, lots of things normies can do.
Also, especially if they are not, if they speak more than one language, there's a lot of help that you can do by translating stuff usually from English to some other languages. There are the videos, there are some great talks about Monero in YouTube For example, the Daniel Kim's videos that are being translated right now to Spanish, but there are also many languages that need help. And that's a very nice way to bring Monero closer to a lot of new people.
Andres, can you talk a little bit about moneronews' work on atomic swaps? I know you're more closely involved with the commit integration team.
Yes. In typical Monero fashion, I cannot disclose a lot about that, but yeah, let's say that the Monero team is very much interested in the commit way of doing swaps. We are in touch with those guys and also with Samurai, and as long as it seems right now, of course it's technically possible. I mean, it works, but it's still very early for us, and the biggest challenge that we see right now is, well, I won't say the biggest because the coders are going to hate me. They do all the hard work. But from the UX side of things, there are a lot of things to solve yet. Because even if you can do the atomic swap itself, the way that those two participants are going to find each other and agree on a price, and then afterwards communicate all the pieces of information that they need to exchange for the swap to actually occur, is challenging from a UX perspective. So we are exploring a bit more about that. But yeah, we're very interested in that. Interested on that. Let's say soon with a TM at the end.
Awesome, thank you.
You know, Justin, going back to that question about how you can get involved as a normie, I think one of the most important things is to really just educate yourself about privacy and what that means, especially with regards to like cryptocurrency and this ecosystem, or really just in the general the digital age. A lot of us are pretty familiar with it in this room, I'm sure, but as far as like being able to educate others, we have to make sure that we are educated ourselves and what tools and techniques there are out there. So there's just been a lot of misinformation with regard to like, I mean, we saw this, for example, in the discussion with Doug and Peter McCormick, right, where we brought up the fungibility discussion. He blatantly was just kind of confused and he thought Bitcoin was fungible. So there's just a lot of information out there that hasn't been understood. So it's best for us to just start from the baseline. I mean, it really comes to like making sure, especially with people that are in the Bitcoin ecosystem, just making sure they understand some of the trade-offs that exist within the Bitcoin space, and then showing them like what the advantages are within Monero. I think that's one of the most effective ways that you can be, one of the most essential ways that you can be effective within the community. And then to second that, it would be, start participating in some of these channels, IRC channels. We're on Matrix, just getting into the core community and starting to participate, like they mentioned, doing the translations. You can always do website development, just participating in the discussion. Chill down here, like she's uploaded a Monero logo to like every website that has a personalization feature on it to add. It doesn't matter if it's a coffee cup or a t-shirt. Like this woman's out here doing everything for Monero and the ecosystems. Like there's so many ways you can get involved. Don't be scared to share your ideas, and don't be scared if they get knocked down, because this is a community that we're going to go back and forth on what it means to be private, what it means to be anonymous, what it means to be secure. But at the end of the day, we just need to continue the discussion. So just keep on fighting.
Yeah, I agree with Devrick. Yeah, you don't have to know how to code to contribute in Monero. Like there is no right or wrong answer. Even just helping someone set up a wallet or introducing it to your mates, like that's sufficient. That is contributing to the ecosystem, right? And look, in my experience over the years for Monero, I believe there's two types of learners, right? As Devrick was saying, like it's good to get familiar with how Monero works and everything before you start, educating people in it. There's people who like to read, right? Read docs. There's even books. There's a book called Mastering Monero. You can educate yourself by reading. And then there's some visual learners, right? And in my experience, most people are visual learners. And my advice would be that the first place to go would be Monero Talk on YouTube, right? Just because it's a old video doesn't mean it's outdated or that information is not relevant anymore. You know, have a flick through, and there's some big names on there. You know, listen to what they're saying, and yeah, if you ever have any questions, you can PM any of us, and you know, someone would always help you guys out. You know, so.
And let's hear from a recent normie, a recent convert to Monero, which is Nam Sardar's on here. Justin, could you bring her up?
Yeah, I will work on inviting her. It'll take a second though.
Guys, I just want to follow up. Yeah, just a lot of great points there. Just want to reiterate, just the sending Monero to people, friends, family, just get them to download a wallet, Cake wallet, Moneronews, whatever it is. Get them to download a wallet and send them some Monero. Send them $1 worth of Monero. Do it to people you see that that aren't even necessarily close friends, acquaintances. Bring it up in conversation. Do it to people that are strangers. We meet them on the street. I've bought various things for Monero, walking around on the streets in Brooklyn. Vendors that are selling things. I sit there. I have a convo with them. I get them to download Cake wallet on the spot, and I buy something off them for Monero. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to do it, because now at this point in time, essentially everybody has heard of crypto. They've all heard of Bitcoin. More have even heard of Doge. Maybe not more, but a lot of people have heard of Dogecoin. I hear everybody talking about Dogecoin in New York, and you'd be surprised. So now they all know crypto. So now you just have to introduce them to this particular one. And the easiest way to do that, just get them to download a wallet and send them a little bit. Especially if they're like out there and they're selling their wares or they're selling something, just get them to accept Monero. The other thing is like tipping too, like get your waiter, people are going back to eating again, going out again. Get your waiter to download Cake while he's serving you, and say, all right, but at the end I'm gonna send you your tip in Monero. You'd be surprised. People are really interested in crypto now. They don't want to miss out on the next big thing. And when you send it to them, you also have the opportunity to now explain the differences between Monero and Bitcoin. Be like, all right, well, if I sent you Bitcoin versus Monero, just so you know, Bitcoin is completely traceable. You can have that whole conversation. And 98% of the normies that you talk to have no idea that Bitcoin is traceable. They just assume that it's not.
One thing that we did. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say a real quick plug, if you guys don't mind. And for people who don't have Monero and you want some Monero, on Twitter, Cake Wallet is always on a daily basis. You write us a nice message, tweet us a nice message, and most likely we'll send you some Monero. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Quick plug. Sorry, guys. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that one thing that we did, I think, back for Christmas 2017, is to make Christmas cards that are actually like a paper wallet of Monero, so you can give that out for birthdays as well, and it comes with a little explanation about how it works. So people get interested. It's a very nice last-minute gift because you don't have to think about anything else, but it gets some interesting conversations.
Yeah, one thing I want to stress is that there is a huge lack of really good information about the Monero out there. I mean, we have some really good resources, but there is always room for someone to go out and put out a really good video about just here, like in the backlog of things I've wanted to do for a while, for example, are 3 videos. right? One of them is just me standing in front of a camera, really easy, and just saying, here are 10 things you should know about Monero. And then another video like, here are 10 things you don't yet know about Monero. Obviously, you might have, but it's clickbait, so you gotta include it somehow, right, to get people to click on the video. And then the third one, I really like this idea, 10 things you can't know about Monero, right? And it's basically just trolling on the fact that you can't learn about things like rich lists and you can't see the addresses and stuff like that, and it'd be pretty cool. So that's an example, right? We don't have really good basic videos even. I mean, back in, 2016, 2017, someone named Savandra put together some good Monero intro videos. Those remain on the getmonero.org website. But those need a refresh. Those need a lot of love, and they certainly need quite a few different voices talking about what Monero is and why. And if you certainly have an audience that watches your content and trusts you, for example, people need to see people supporting Monero. And so that doesn't take any technical skills. I don't really do any coding personally, so there's ways for you to get involved and spread the word of Monero without being a super, super technical person, right? You don't need to write the atomic swap software. Instead, you could help by contacting press. You can make a press release like the Monero Space Worker did, stuff like that, where you get the word out. And there's plenty of ways you can help.
Actually, there's a big percentage of non-coders on these speakers.
Yeah, I love the Monero wallet gift ideas. That's awesome. I agree. You can give Monero, you can talk about Monero, you can rap about Monero, you can write poems about Monero, you can bake Monero cookies. I mean, there's so many ways.
When Monero Slam Poetry Conference.
Another way that you can also help Monero that maybe it's not that intuitive for newcomers is to actually complain about stuff that doesn't work yet or doesn't work well or that are confusing in Reddit and whatever, on Twitter. For example, I mean, at least in Monerubio on the subreddit, we get several complaints about, oh, this doesn't work, or this should work this way, or I would love if X feature will be included. And you don't have to know anything besides trying to use Monero to do that. And it's very helpful because it gives ideas to us or gives us a sense of what's needed for the community, or especially for broader adoption, because the newcomers are the ones that are fresh and they haven't read a lot about how the thing works and what nodes are and what do you need them. So it's this is too difficult, this is cumbersome, or this is difficult to understand. And it forces people that are already on Monero to come up with better solutions for those.
But when you do ask, try to ask politely.
Always.
I want people calling up Andres at like midnight and being like, why did you steal my money? Figure this out right now.
That's like, that's one of the first things that we said internally. Every time that somebody suggests a new feature, so to speak, it's like, okay, are people going to call us and say, oh, you scam us with our money? No, yeah, okay, let's do it then. Because you get all that. And I'm sure Vic here knows as well, the Google reviews are especially harmful, usually. It's like, where's my money? Where's my money? And you say, okay, but what happened with your phone? Oh, and it's in the bottom of a lake. Oh, well, I cannot do anything about that, sorry. But it's like, oh, crappy app, one star, I hate you.
Yeah, I mean, what's frustrating is when people write a review without even reaching out to us. And also, I think it's human nature. You go you go have a nice dinner. You don't think, oh, what a nice dinner. I'm going to go on Yelp and write a nice review. No, you don't have the time for that. But if things go badly, then you're definitely going to leave a bad review. So yeah, I think those store reviews should be taken with a grain of salt. So as Andre said, though, but if you're on, definitely give us a review, good or bad, but definitely leave a review either way.
Especially when it comes to people's money, they get understandable, very emotional.
Yeah, I think people are just quick to panic. Just the other day, I sent a mate Monero. I'm not sure what wallet they were using, but I sent it to them, and they said that they haven't received it yet, and they didn't sync their wallet. Like they had to like refresh their wallet or something, and then it appeared. But when someone panics, it makes you question yourself. Like, did I send it? Did I put in the correct address? But yeah, I think that's just people are just quick to panic when it comes to money. So I believe the Monero community in time, we're just going to get stronger and stronger. This is the start. This is the first Monero Twitter space. I think we've had close to around 300 people here at peak so far, and this is just the start, guys. Everyone in here is still early for Monero. At some point, every crypto trader is going to turn to Monero. I have mates that are traders. They trade Monero, and everyone at some point, some moment along their crypto journey will always turn to Monero. The use case is there, and I believe we're just going to get stronger and stronger. And yeah, and shout out to Justin, man. Justin's doing a great job. He's always on the clubhouses. He's always tweeting. Same with Seth. Same with everyone on here. Gionic, Cecilia, Vic, Douglas, Devrick. I've met some really, really cool people along my Monero journey, and it's fun. Speaking to like-minded people who value privacy. It's cool. Yeah.
Thanks, Don. Just wait till it gets a bit later and we start breaking open the wine, though. I'm not drinking it at 3:20 p.m. Central, but give it time. Give it time. It'll be even more fun in, I'd say, a few hours. Just going through some of the questions that came in. Thanks again. If you want to leave some questions for us to cover on the call, again, you can send a tweet with the hashtag #MoneroSpace. Just because we only have 10 slots here, so we don't really have the ability to bring everybody on, sadly, for this type of call. But obviously, there are many other parts. You're certainly still a huge part of the Monero community, and no one can tell you otherwise. So Monero takes in anybody, and anybody can make anything they want out of it, of course. You had some questions. We had Jonathan Daniel send a question in. Do you have any recommendations to Monero home mining setup? Maybe something with a Raspberry Pi. So it definitely is possible to mine on honestly pretty much anything. And a Raspberry Pi isn't like the most inefficient thing you can mine on with the CPU, but at that point, to be honest, you're kind of talking more of a hobby project just for the sake of fun, which is of course a really, really good learning exercise for sure. But we don't exactly have people making data centers of Raspberry Pis, really. I mean, you could try, but most people are going to use the Ryzen PCs. I don't know if anybody had some other comments on mining and in particular. I don't think we have any of the big miners on, like Seth Estrada. Sometimes in these conversations, I don't think he's here, but maybe he's just lost and buried in the list somewhere. But he's a good person to ask. However, Raspberry Pis are really good for running like Monero nodes, especially if you hook it up to like even a really, really cheap SSD. Like it's great, right? You don't need anything else. So if you want to have a really good weekend project, you got a long weekend coming up, most people at least here. So if you want to play around with Monero, you're certainly able to try mining and running a node. Some people saying that they recommend using Rock Pi instead of RPI. I don't really know what that means, but that's a comment I saw in the Monero Space Matrix. I just wanted to pass that along.
Yeah, use that Pi 64. That's probably what they're mentioning. It's just another. It's similar to the Raspberry Pi. It'd be similar priced, but it has the AES instruction set built into the hardware. So if the person wanted to run the node and then also like mine for whatever reason, they could potentially do that with a Pine64.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. If you have AES, you're going to be like a gazillion times faster than something that does not have AES. So yes, especially.
For RandomX, you can Google RandomX benchmarks, and it'll show what hash rate you're going to get with your particular hardware. I think from a return on investment point of view, the Ryzen, like Justin said, particularly 3950X, gives the best bang for the buck if you're building a rig specifically, for mining, which of course is a general purpose computer. So you'll still be able to do everything else with it. But yeah, Ryzen's are the way to go. I saw an interesting question with the Monero Space hashtag on Twitter. I don't think we covered it. From AMC to the moon. As Monero becomes more popular, how will the community react with increased government scrutiny? Will the community continue to resist government intrusion or compromise for wider adoption, like what the Bitcoin community is doing? Anyone want to take a stab?
Someone else should take this too, just to get stuff on the record. But to be super, super blunt, and obviously no one here controls the Monero network really in any way, certainly not any meaningful way, and certainly not any legal way. But no, Monero will not compromise. Monero will always be on the bleeding edge of whatever best privacy they can implement out for everybody. Monero has been doing that since 2014. That will not change. When Monero launched, right, it had better privacy than most people are getting with the best Bitcoin mixing tools now. I mean, obviously, some people are going to go back and forth on that, but when Monero launched, you just never had addresses that you could look up, right? You never had a rich list. That was back in 2014, right? And since then, things have gotten so much more private, and it's going to keep getting more private. I never see the Monero community really compromising in a way that will make it uncompetitive really in any way. And certainly Monero is not going to add like a backdoor, so to speak, in order to just make it work. Like, people deserve the ability to transact without having to have a company tell them they can't, right? And a big part of that is making it so companies can't just arbitrarily assign risk scores to people. Like, we don't do that with cash. It should not be the case that everyone is surveilled that way when we move to a digital system. So no, Monero will not compromise that way. Anyone have thoughts on that? Did that answer your question, Giannik?
Yeah, that was actually someone's question on Twitter. Rob Rocks, or AMC to the moon. Yeah. Yeah, great explanation. Well, I mean, Monero's actively stopped supporting certain features despite particular services actively using them. So like the TX extra field, or we had the payment IDs and so on. Like, Monero doesn't compromise. We move on and we give notice. We try to give enough heads up so people can update and keep their services active. But the ethos of the Monero network is just always becoming more private and keeping up with technological advancement, because that's natural. That tracing tools are going to get better, so Monero has to improve all the time as well.
Yeah, Giannik, I'm going to put you on the spot for this similar question, and if anyone else wants to chime in after and give a response too, that'd be much appreciated. But there's a lot of discussion in the Bitcoin space about how hard forks are generally damaging to the ecosystem. So why is it important? Like, a lot of Bitcoiners don't quite understand why you would want to purposefully break backwards compatibility for certain things, or purposely remove certain flexibility and features. So can you talk about, like, broadly, why, from Monero's purpose of protecting privacy, we would want to hard fork? Why not just soft fork all the time? Why remove features on purpose?
Well, maybe I don't have the exact answer you're looking for, but I'll give it my best. So in terms of the difference, I guess we should first explain the difference between a soft fork and a hard fork. And a soft fork limits the rules of the network additionally. So a soft fork can only put additional constraints on the existing network. It can't fundamentally change the way the network operates or add some feature that was not intended to be there to begin with. So with Monero, what we've noticed is the developer community is always looking for ways to improve privacy, and that's the number one goal. And anything else is subservient to that, including the comfort of exchanges that may have to update their nodes, or different services, or sometimes even users. You're going to have to update your software if you haven't used Monero in a year. So that's one of the things that we just have to live with if we want to fight for privacy and achieve it in the real world, because it's a daily fight. These companies, these tracing companies, are not sitting idle, and they're always developing new tools and always trying to improve their heuristics. So Monero keeps improving, and one of the drawbacks is that once a year maybe you're going to have to update your software. The exchange is going to have to update their node, but that's the price of keeping our users' transactions private, and that's again the number one goal. And the other thing is, some Bitcoin users, that's the other delusion that a lot of people live with, is that Bitcoin is gonna absorb all the functions of any and all altcoins out there. And if that were true, we would have seen it already. Bitcoin has existed for 10 years. Some of the features that were actually implemented in Monero, like confidential transactions, were invented for Bitcoin. And that was back in 2015, and you notice that 6 years later, Bitcoin still doesn't have confidential transactions, which is actually a misnomer. It's confidential amounts, but Bitcoin still doesn't have that, and that's the basic requirement for any sort of privacy on a cryptocurrency. You want the amounts hidden, because you can determine a lot if you just if you follow the trail of change and amounts being sent back and forth. You can glean all sorts of information. So Monero adopted that technology way before Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is not on track to adopt it ever. So is Bitcoin going to become the end all be all of cryptocurrencies and be everything that any other coin out there is trying to do? I don't think so, because Bitcoin hasn't hard forked since 2010 when they had an inflation bug. So and Monero keeps hard forking, and we're able to do that because the community is united by this mission to create private money. We're not united by number go up. We're not united by digital store of value, quote unquote. We want private, fungible, sovereign money, and sovereign in the sense of self-sovereignty. Not government. And that's the difference between Bitcoin and Monero, is we have this goal that allows us to take certain technological challenges head on and actually improve over time. So that's my answer.
I think you answered that really well. Good. Thanks, Giannik. The only thing I wanted to add too is that sometimes we need to specifically force people to do the best practices, right? There's a lot of people that say, oh, well, privacy is important, but why don't you give people the choice, right, to choose what sort of privacy you want? Well, if we gave people the choice as to whether or not they'd make a private transaction, maybe Vic, Vic's a great guy, right? But Vic hadn't been around in the Monero community when he made the Cake wallet, right? He made this thing, he published it. It wasn't open source. People are like, what are you doing? It'd be great to hear his story on that in a second here. But he might have built a wallet where you didn't enforce the best practices. Like, what if you could make a transparent wallet in Monero? Maybe somebody would make one, and then exchanges would use that because it's cheaper or whatever. And Monero, of course, has its own set of history where people didn't use ring signatures well. But by using these hard forks, we can also take the opportunity to say, well, actually, we're going to impose these new best practices on the network, and we're going to make transactions look as indistinguishable as any other transaction, right? So if we were just allowing people to send the same transactions that they were back before Ring CT, for example, before the amounts were hidden, well, that's going to be really bad. So by allowing Monero to have hard forks and enforcing these sorts of things, well, now we have far better transactions than Monero did back in 2014. So I'm excited by that. What do you think, Vic? Did I throw you under the bus too much there? I don't know. Would you have built a traceable Monero wallet?
No, I mean, crypto in general, and especially Monero, I mean, it's built on what cryptocurrency was supposed to be built on, which is consensus, right? So even if we had built a wallet like that, I mean, soon enough, the consensus would be, hey, don't use this wallet. And going to the other question about what would happen if the Monero community or the Monero devs did capitulate to law enforcement or government regulations, and they did do something where Monero is less private than we think, then there would be a fork, and there would be a new thing where it's private again. I guess that's the beauty of cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The second, anyone want to raise their hand here to say once, like, if Monero did, and it won't, but if Monero did ever end up at a backdoor or something, want to just give a thumbs up to say that you would switch to a different coin? Let's not die on the hill of let's use Monero for the sake of Monero. Let's actually say, let's move over to something else if that ever did happen. I think most people are on the same page with that one. Anyone on stage want to defend the sake of supporting Monero, regardless of how little privacy it would have after someone had their way with it, in theory?
No,
Yeah,
because
I think who wants to play that side of the argument here?
No, I'm not the other side of the argument, but I think that one of the things that are very strong in the Monero community is like the main idea, the main concept. So the hard fork could be a technical issue that you have to solve, but the main idea of, okay, the most private money possible right now is very strong in the community. So we'll find a way.
Speaking of different coins, we had a question with the hashtag about Monero. What does the Monero community think of Monero? And I guess I can take a stab at that. Monero is the least shitty of all shitcoins. So just like Bitcoiners think that Monero is the only shitcoin to pay attention to, Monero people generally think that Monero is the least shitty of all others. So if you were to jump to any other privacy coin, I guess Monero would be the one. But it's basically a copy of Monero with some added features. They're not as afraid to break the network, if it happens, it happens, I guess. But they're playing around with some of the newer cryptography that Monero is going to add in the future, but Monero adds that at a more cautious pace, just to keep everyone's money safe. But I guess, yeah, Monero is just ahead of the curve and, not afraid to break things.
It's like a mixture of Monero's Litecoin and Dogecoin in one.
Yeah, exactly. We also had a good question from Sal B.
Wait, just going back to Monero, wasn't that initially created to make the fork Monero V into a joke?
Yeah, there was a time when there were a lot of Monero forks coming out, and some of them were malicious because they were reusing the blockchain, meaning the transaction graph of Monero. So there were some ways to de-anonymize certain transactions if you ended up spending outputs on both chains, and people compared them. So Monero V and Monero Classic, those were considered malicious, and because of that. And Monero came out at the same time, and they restarted. They started their chain from scratch and so on. But yeah, that was around the same time, I guess. I see a good question here from Sal B. Osen MD. How much longer until Monero reaches scaling issues like Bitcoin faced? Second layer. And the second question, are there ways of syncing the blockchain faster for people who haven't logged into their wallet for a while? Anyone want to take that one?
I mean, in theory, someone could run a light wallet server, but that's probably not the type of user that's going to ask that question. So the best answer is probably just to open it once a month or so to make sure that you are syncing relatively regularly. I know in the last year, since Monero transaction adoption is way up, there's certainly more transactions you need to process. So it might take a few moments on a modern computer, but maybe a modern computer, but even a phone might take a bit too, or certainly a phone. Maybe the best thing is to run your own node. That way you just have the most reliable connection. That'll probably be easier than telling someone to run a lightweight server or something. Just run a node with a Raspberry Pi or something and then connect to that, and you'll have a reliable database to scan with rather than being reliant on someone else's. So if you can run a node, I advise that. Otherwise, just open the wallet every so often to streamline that a bit.
And what do we think about the scaling question?
Sorry, what was the scaling question?
So that was how much longer until Monero reaches scaling issues like Bitcoin faced?
Oh, Doug, do you want to take this one?
Sorry, guys, I'm in the middle of something right now.
All right. Debrick, want to take this one?
Well, one of the things I was going to comment on is just the research that Pedro Moreno Sanchez has been doing on second layer, essentially what would look like Lightning Network, second layer solutions on Monero. He had some significant work and solutions set up there. I think there just needs to be some network protocol changes in order to actually make that happen. So that research has already started. It's actually some of the work that I'm going to be looking at with my master's thesis. So definitely excited about like second layer solutions, but there are definitely trade-offs there. As far as scalability, I mean, you can also consider that with the blocks, we have dynamic block sizes. So the blockchain itself is going to be fairly dynamic as far as like filling up transactions and whatnot. We've seen this in the past couple months with the influx of transactions. I think it was just in a couple weeks ago, we were able to see like the effect of the block size changing. So I'm not sure when we're going to see that. It'll be interesting, but Seth mentioned just a couple weeks ago, we had a pretty significant change in the block size, and the network did really well at processing those transactions. So keep testing it, I guess.
And another example of Monero handling scaling well is in the last video by Josh Oshevitz. I don't know if you follow him. He's a trader on Twitter. So he did a short video about Monero, and he highlighted how the number of transactions has gone up, 5 or 10x, and the transaction fees have stayed exactly the same, between a third and half a cent. So that just shows a network that can scale on layer 1, and that's one of Monero's goals too.
Hi, Nam.
Hey, Nam. Nice to see you on. We've been trying to get Nam on as a speaker for a while, but you made it.
Hi, guys. How are you? I've been listening intently. Congratulations on hosting the first Monero Spaces. This is great. I'm excited to be here.
No, we're great to have you on. Are you still in Mexico?
Yes, I'm actually at the hairdressers. I'm in Mexico. Yes, I've just been really busy lately, so I haven't been like last. I think I tuned into Monero Spaces when Monero hit 500, and I think we were all live at the time, and I was just connecting wherever I got Wi-Fi because I was in the middle of flights. And now it's been 3 weeks in Mexico. It's really good. I just wanted to say there's a lot of things that are popping into my mind as the discussion proceeds. So, I'm happy to jump in at some points. I had some things I wanted to say about the atomic swaps, and now about the like how we can promote Monero to like noobs, like people that don't know anything about it. For example, I've been talking to friends that I haven't, seen in a while, and they've all had babies. And it's, and I think like a lot of people have this tradition to make gifts to babies and to like newborns. So what I'm doing is a lot of my friends whose children I haven't met, and I want to, and I have been, so they have been having babies. I'm asking them to download the Cake wallet and sending them some Monero. So that's also another thing that, you know, if you want to touch base with people, and especially when there's important occasions in their lives, like as a gifting mechanisms, and I think this just gets them involved. Obviously, you know, educating ourselves is the most important thing, but then spreading that education to others. And then when they ask the very obvious question, hey, so what's up with Bitcoin? Then you tell them, hey, so this is what's going on. This is how Monero improves on, you know, all of these characteristics. And there's so much going on with Bitcoin lately, and I feel like everything, all the news that's coming out is sort of reducing its decentralization in different ways. So yeah, so I think Monero is getting a leg up on the decentralization subject, right?
Yeah, the way I see it, a lot of the assumptions people have had on Bitcoin decentralization, they're certainly not completely broken, but they're being tested by quite a few different external parties. And you know, in the Monero community, we kind of feel that they're not really pushing back as much as we feel that it would be prudent to. And so Monero, we're kind of building out this infrastructure to be able to withstand these sorts of potential pressures. Partially because Monero has been subject to a lot of them. Like Bitcoin was subject to quite a few pressures when it first started out, but now, you know, attackers are far more familiar with what Bitcoin is than they were in 2010. So they have new tactics, and we're trying to stay ahead of them in the Monero community. At least that's how I see it. But yeah, atomic swaps are an important part of that.
Do you think Gemini and Coinbase will start treating the Bitcoin that came through the atomic swaps the same way as they treat the CoinJoin Bitcoin?
My take is yes.
Because I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, what are some of the vulnerabilities of Monero that you see arise over time? Because obviously Bitcoin had the transparency, and that has been a big one. What about Monero? Like, what aspects of Monero that regulators can kind of hone in?
I mean, I can comment on this briefly. I think to a large extent, what they do is they just make VASPs. These are like exchanges you can think of, like, just feel very uncomfortable supporting these assets. Same thing with banks, right? They can put pressure on them and say, hey, you know, we don't feel that you have a sufficient enough anti-money laundering program in order to handle these assets, right? They can just say stuff like that. And they can really put a lot of pressure to the point where it takes far more effort than it's worth for their business in order to support these sorts of assets, and so they just drop it. I think that's certainly one of the major risks. I don't think that's super realistic at this point, because people in the Monero community at least have proven that, hey, we're going to buy Monero, we're going to use Monero however it takes, and if it's not listed on a US exchange, people are still going to buy it and use it elsewhere. So I think they want to have access to people actually, you know, transacting on surveilled venues as opposed to not. But, you know, in theory, if there was like a global front against it, they would try to ban it in every jurisdiction, perhaps, but it's obviously a pretty complicated topic. So there just are fewer things to go off of when you're trying to censor transactions compared to a transparent blockchain. That's just the way it is.
We have an interesting question that I just saw. I think many people who are new to Monero might be asking themselves this.